Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
So OBDM, that stands for Our Big Dumb Mouth. And I'm a Bigfoot believer. I believe in this subject. I still make fun of this stuff because some of it seems so goofy and ridiculous. And when you dig through the Missing 411 stuff, like you initially, when you read it, you come to the profile points. And the profile points of what categorizes what makes a missing 411 case a missing 411 case. Also, people who go missing and their body is found is often found in a place that has already been searched. And so it almost seems like there's a hunting ground. And people somehow either stumble into a trap or a trap is laid for them. I get ostracized just for making jokes. Kind of coarse is like long pubic hair. Like if the pubic hair was like 5 to 6 inches, that's some pretty long pubic hair, but that's the consistency. Hell, the Native Americans would often talk openly about trading with the wild men. Hey, this is Midnight Mike, and you're listening to Airey Bros Radio.
What's up, y'all? This is Airey Bros Radio, and this is episode 88 with Midnight Mike from OBDM Podcast. You ready, Prince?
You kidding me, Richie Rich? We're talking missing 411. We're talking UFOs. We're talking cryptids. You better believe I'm ready for this one.
Yo, if you guys haven't listened to the OBDM podcast, Our Big Dumb Mouth, with Midnight Mike, Cretched, and Joe, you guys are missing out. They take all of this crazy stuff, paranormal, cryptids, Bigfoot, missing 411, and they put a little comedic spin on it to have you laughing the whole time. This was an honor and a pleasure. And again, the power of the podcast, man. You get these people, get to have an hour of their time and have an amazing conversation, pick their brains and get information and content for y'all to dig your teeth into.
Yeah, Richie Rich. And the craziness going on in the world, nothing like talking some cryptids to forget what's going on in the world, keep it light, and learn some new things. So put your tinfoil hat on for this one. You're going to expand your mind. You're going to squeegee that third eye, and we're going to turn you on to a bunch of things you probably never even heard of.
That's right. Sit back, relax, get out your pen and paper, take some notes. You're going to want to look some things up. And if you go out in the woods to hike, to run, to get out in nature, just keep your head on a swivel.
Yeah. Check out the OBDM podcast. Tell Midnight Mike the Airey Bros sent you. And as always, if you like this podcast, drop a comment, rate, review, subscribe, give it to all your friends for Christmas. And as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Airey Bros Radio.
Yo, and when you're done listening, go click on the show notes. Go to our sponsors, give them some love. Go get yourself some honey bunches. Give the gift of a great outdoor snacking material for the holidays. Give them some honey bunches. Give them some Mount Hagen. Everyone needs some good instant coffee when they're camping. Give them some love. Much love. Namaste from the boys of 1512. Like I said, I love the show. I think you guys are great. I love the sound bites and how you do the call-ins. I think Joe is amazing, even when he comes off the rails sometimes. I love him. I think you mentioned not too long in a couple of recent episodes. I mean, you've been at this for over a decade now, correct?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
So I guess tell us a little bit about, or for the people that are listening that may not know what OBDM is and how you guys got started and how we got to where we are right now.
So OBDM, that stands for Our Big Dumb Mouth. I started the podcast probably in 2005, 2006. I was playing in a metal band at the time, and me and my bass player roommate, we had Pro Tools. We had a lot of equipment laying around the house to record demos, and I just started to listen to some podcasts, and I was like, hey, you know what? I like talk radio. I loved growing up listening to Howard Stern, Opie and Anthony, Art Bell, and George Norrie at night, and I was like, let's just do one. And so I did a few episodes. Took some time off. Didn't understand the technology. Didn't understand really how RSS feeds work or how to get into iTunes really worked. Took about a year off and then started doing it pretty much every week starting in 2007. Went through many different co-hosts, but it's been pretty much me the entire time with a revolving cast of co-hosts talking about conspiracies, paranormal topics, our daily lives, whatever might be going on. And we try to add humor, crass talk. Can be very raunchy. And we try to make it as fun as possible. I usually tell people, if you're new to the show, it probably takes 2 or 3 episodes listening all the way through to understand what the show is trying to do, because a lot of people don't like when you mix humor with conspiracies or you make fun of Bigfoot reports. And I'm a Bigfoot believer. I believe in the subject. I still make fun of this stuff because some of it seems so goofy and ridiculous that you can't help. It lends to the humorous kind of comments that we make at times. But that's what it is. And, we've been doing a live show on YouTube for the past 3 years. And so that's added a whole new element of people being able to call in. And it's a nice platform to hear what other people are experiencing out there, what they believe, and especially during this whole COVID thing, what they're dealing with. And it seems to be something that people like. They like to get on the air and yak with us for some reason. So I like it though.
I love it, and I absolutely love the comedic aspect to the whole show. I love the like I said, I love the sound bites and the Alex Jones drop-ins every once in a while and that sort of stuff. You mentioned you were in a heavy metal band. You have an awesome radio voice. Were you the lead singer?
Yeah, but dude, my voice sucks when it comes to singing. It was like if you mix like Slayer with Nirvana and like some punk elements. It was like a 3-piece band. We loved like Dillinger Escape Plan, like really mathy kind of metal stuff, but with a lot of melody. And so we put out like an album in 2004, 2005. Attracted a little bit of label interest from some people, but that fell through. Tried to go on tour. I got sick and never tried to go on tour again. I don't think the road agrees with me very much. So but my bass player Scott, one of my best friends, he still tours with his band Lopan. And the singer in Lopan, he was a co-host on OBDM for about almost 4 or 5 years. So music has always been a very prominent part of the podcast. They produce the jingles, the intro song, the outro song, a lot of the musical transitions throughout the entire podcast. So I always try to infuse high production quality with the podcast and music whenever I can.
Yeah, it's great. Oh, go ahead, Jim.
Speaking of the high production quality, do you do the graphics for your website? Because that's some pretty good high production quality,
Yes.
and I'm very impressed. Yeah,
Yeah, I got a degree in art. My co-host Joe and I, we met in art college. So I have a degree in animation and video editing. I don't do that really anymore. I did that for about 12 years out of my life. Now I work in IT. I do computer programming and like infrastructure engineering, working on servers. So I just tried to learn as much as possible about every little thing so I don't have to rely on anybody to do anything, because I realized if I have to rely on anybody, then I'm waiting for them to get a project done, or I'm waiting for them to get graphics done. So I just got to learn how to do everything myself, because I'm not a control freak. I just want to put something out. And that started back when I was like 14, when I wanted to create comic books. I sat around and just drew comic books. I didn't know how to make one. I just looked at comics and emulated that, went to Kinko's, printed up my own comic books, and tried to sell them on the street. I sucked at it, but there was a process involved. You learned how to print up a comic book, what worked, what didn't. You get feedback from your peers, and you keep going. Same thing with the podcast. You learn, hopefully over time, how to make it sound better and better if you care about that kind of thing. And I just kept upgrading my audio. I upgraded my rack processors. I figured out about compression, brick wall limiting, saturation, exciters, and how to compress the low end. So it sounds, you might have a shitty voice, but if you compress the low end just right, it can make it sound like you're on the goddamn FM radio, and that's what I want.
Yeah, you've got that going. I said that to Jimmy. I'm like, this sounds like it's on the radio. This is unreal.
Because I use an FM multi-band processor for my radio, for my podcast. I spent some money. I have the plugins. I have the VST plugins to do it all within like SoundForge to compress the low end and get the highs to sparkle a little bit. But then I just drop some money on an FM rack processor, so I don't have to wait. So as soon as I press record on the episode, it's recording on my Tascam, and when I'm done, I stop, and then it is done. Like, I don't have to do any editing. I don't have to wait for it to process in Pro Tools. Ricky, who's on the Union of the Unwanted, he records everything in Pro Tools. He's also a very skilled musician and production artist when it comes to audio. But when you work in Pro Tools, when you render that audio out, it renders out in real time. So if he records a 3-hour episode, he's got to render that thing back out, and that takes 3 hours. I ain't got that kind of time, so I just want to do everything in real time as much as possible.
Yeah, we used to have a recording studio on a college campus, and then, March 2020 happened, and the school has got shut down, and we haven't been back to the recording studio since. So we've been doing everything from our apartment, and we obviously we have the Adobe tools and stuff like that. But yeah, we appreciate the insight.
No, Adobe has some great stuff. Like I have the Adobe, I think it's Adobe Edition, and it has like the broadcast limiters on there, and I use it for a long time. You can get a great sound out of that, no doubt. Like, that's my backup. If everything falls apart, that's where I go to.
Cool. So I guess, let's get into, I know you're big into the 411.
I am.
411, David Pilates, and I started doing summers here in Colorado back in 2014 to train for ultra marathons, and then I would go back to different locations for the winter because I'm not much of a snow person. And then I moved here full time in June of 2017, and then again, as I'm out running on the Colorado Trail and all these big open spaces and stuff, I don't know how I discovered how I came across it, but all of a sudden I'm reading these stories about these thousands of people that go missing in national parks and big open spaces, which is a lot of where I'm running in Colorado. So since 2017, I've been all into the missing 411. Anyone that goes out into the woods to do trail runs or hiking, I always let them know about this stuff, not to scare the shit out of them, but just to make them aware of like, hey, there's a lot of people that go missing. And after about 2 weeks of some search, it kind of just falls by the wayside. How did you get into it?
I got into it. My little brother, I guess he's not a little brother anymore, but he was in the show. He made me aware of it. And also a former co-host, Bryce, they kind of made me aware of it maybe about in 2012, 2013. And I then just sought it out through YouTube, listening to stuff that David Pilates would say on George Norrie's Coast to Coast AM. And then I started buying the books. And then I pretty much bought every book that he put out. And I just got the newest one, Missing 411 Montana, which I'm digging through right now. And this is David's first book about a specific state. Normally, like, he'll put out something like Off the Grid, which deals with possibly people within the city or the East Coast or Southwest. He'll just take a variety of national parks and write about them. So it's not state specific. This is the first, and what I assume is a long line of books about specific states. So I just started digging through, And when you dig through the missing 411 stuff, like you initially, when you read it, you come to the profile points, and the profile points of what categorizes what makes a missing 411 case a missing 411 case is the interesting like data point, because people go missing all the time. But David Paulides looks for very specific things in order to categorize them as missing 411. Like one of those is that if you go missing, people most likely go missing in these missing 411 profile points if it's dusk or dawn. It's not to say people don't go missing anywhere else. It's just like he is found when it correlates to other things, dusk or dawn. Also, people who go missing and their body is often found in a place that has already been searched, which is creepy. That's like one of the creepiest things is that you have search and rescue out looking for these people, and they'll search miles and miles and miles in square radius, and then the body winds up a few hundred yards from where the victim originally was. That is creepy. Sometimes the body's found days later, sometimes weeks, sometimes bodies will appear years later, but usually within the search radius that has already been searched. A lot of times the people who go missing, they have a disability or an illness. Oftentimes they are found near creeks, rivers, ponds, lakes, and streams. So there's like a body of water that is near where they disappear. Also boulders in granite. That's one of the things that he hit on early on is usually there's large quantities of boulders and granite right around the area where they go missing. And also there tends to be a point of separation where either it's a single or a lone hiker they're not aware of their surroundings and they go missing, or the person who is in the very end of a hiking group, they will say, hey, you know what? Go ahead. I'm just going to stay here and tie my shoe. And then they're never heard from again. It also could happen within just a few seconds. There are stories where there is a family out in a clearing. He is walking with his young son. He turns around for a few seconds, looks back at his son, and that son is gone. It happens that fast. And it seems so crazy to kind of consider that, but that's the testimony. That's what people are saying to the search and rescue, the police departments, the FBI who come investigate. It seems so crazy. And those profile points pretty much make up what a missing 411 case is. I guess we shouldn't leave out weather. Usually weather tends to impact the search. So when someone goes missing, oftentimes there is an unexpected storm that will happen that will impede search and rescue efforts. And also canines. Canines have a tough time picking up on the scent of a missing person, or they'll pick up on the scent and then they'll hit something and then the dog will just lay down and no longer engage in the track. So really creepy stuff there.
I know David doesn't like to jump to conclusions of what he thinks it is or how it happens. Do you have any conclusions, or is it so vast it's kind of hard to jump to any?
David, in my opinion, David Paulides drops hints, and he will include like there's certain like segments or newspaper clippings that he will mention at the end of his talk. Like I gave a talk in Canada, and at the very end, he brought up a newspaper clipping of where these people had gone missing near a lake, but also then he brought up a newspaper clipping that said that there were orbs of light seen in the sky a couple weeks previous. So you could attribute that to UFOs, possibly aliens. The talk I saw him give in Phoenix early in 2020, the first half of the talk was about Bigfoot. And from my knowledge, he hasn't given that talk very often. And it was fascinating to hear him talk about Bigfoot and what he believes Bigfoot to be. And then he said, there is no relation to the talk I'm giving about Bigfoot and my next talk, which is about missing 411. But some of the stuff that he talked about in the Bigfoot talk, which would include sometimes when people see Bigfoot or experience have a Bigfoot encounter, they would often feel sick, like they're hiking with a group of people, and then they have nausea or a headache come over them that would cause them to turn back and go to their car, which is a missing 411 profile point, the point of separation. I've come to my best guess at this point about this, because I've gone back and forth between UFOs, Bigfoot, portals, demons, jinn, trolls, goblins, all that kind of stuff. And I take it all pretty serious. It seems to me that people are there's three things that happen. People are being taken. Abduction is taking place. I believe that the people who are abducted, they are being examined for some purpose. And after that examination, a determination is being made whether or not that person is going to be taken somewhere, killed, or let go. And so it almost seems like there's a hunting ground, and people somehow either stumble into a trap or a trap is laid for them. Much like human hunters, they'll lay a trap for a raccoon. Sometimes another animal stumbles into that trap. And then when a hunter goes and examines that trap, well, it's not they weren't looking to snare a mongoose or a possum. It's not what they're looking for. So they might kill it. They might release it. Or it might already be dead from being in a trap for so long. That's what I think it seems like we're dealing with. And there are other people that have tracked some of the missing 411 data points. And there's a guy named Spriggs. I don't have the book offhand, but his last name is Spriggs. And he mapped the data points of people who have gone missing, specifically, I believe, in the Appalachian Mountain area. And I talked with him just a little bit. He was very guarded. It didn't seem like he wanted to talk about it too much, but in his brief summation, he believed he was discovering a hunting pattern of a certain creature. Like they were going from area to area, and the missing people would follow that. It was almost like a hunting migration pattern that he discovered, or at least what he thought. And it is curious, like a lot of the missing 411 people go missing. Not only is it like around national parks, but it's typically around cave systems, like large cave systems. And you can bring up the missing 411 map on Google, and then people have overlaid their own cave system map, and it lines up pretty good. I did that with a map of military entrance bases. And that lines up pretty good as well, where if you look at military bases that take on new recruits and you put the missing 411 map over that, it's not too far off. But also then we're just making guesses that maybe those are just common areas where people like to go, and not necessarily anything that has to do with missing 411. It's just happenstance. But I think the cave theory in missing 411 is a little bit more intriguing.
Interesting. And I think the most interesting missing 411 stuff for me is the hunters who, I would think if there's anyone hopefully qualified to be out in the woods or surviving in the woods, it would be hunters. But there's all these stories of hunters that go missing, or I believe you guys talked about it one time, the gentleman that was in his tree stand.
Yeah. Donald Shrum.
There you go.
His name's Donald Shrum. And that was back in the 60s. And this is brought up actually by David Paulides himself in the very back of one of his books. He didn't feature it as a missing 411 case, but he brought it up as an odd case. I always leave him read the back of his book, because he'll bring up little things that I believe hints at what he thinks might be going on. And so it was one of those cases was Donald Shrum which was a guy in his back in the 1960s. He went hunting with two of his friends. He got separated, and it was late at night, and so he decided to, in order to protect himself, climb a tree and kind of tie himself off, so creatures of the night didn't come and try to attack him. But then next thing you know, a UFO lands down. Two white entities, I guess they could have been aliens with like white suits, came marching towards him. Then a robot came to his tree and they tried to shake him down. They released this kind of gas that made him pass out, but apparently they didn't use the right dosage because he kept waking up and passing out over and over again. And he fought these aliens, these humanoids and robots off like the entire night until they must have got frustrated and just left. And there's a book all about it on Donald Shrum, and it's fascinating. I kind of take him at his word because something that crazy, yeah, you could say he did it for publicity because he just wanted to make money. But in the 1960s, that's nothing but ridicule. That could just ruin your life, at that point in time. It's a little bit more accepted now, but back then, you don't need that kind of hassle.
Right.
Yeah, but the hunter stuff is much more crazy because you are dealing with people that are pretty much trained to be in the woods, so they like to be in the woods, so they're used to dealing with things that are a little bit more out of the ordinary, possibly, or they understand the situation. They're armed in a certain way. They can take care of themselves, or they know how far away they are. They understand the sun and direction, land navigation. They understand that. In the Missing 411 Hunters movie that David put out not too long ago, there was an older man sitting on a stump. He was out there with like, I think 5 to 6 other people. He was sitting on a stump waiting for animal prey to come down near him. Why? Because he was down at the bottom of the hill. There are 3 guys up, probably a few hundred yards away, trying to chase deer down towards them so they could get a shot. And so this old guy was just sitting on the stump, and his buddy, probably a few hundred feet away, here's what he can only describe as a trap being closed. And he didn't think much of it at the time. But then next thing you know, they go to see where he's at, and he's not there. They and then the search just kind of continued. I got here. I'll play 20 seconds of it. This is what his friend was describing that he heard at the time where his friend went missing.
Did your dad tell you about a sound he heard in the woods that day?
He said he heard some kind of snapping or crack sound that was strange. It wasn't something he normally hears in the woods. He still talks to me about it. I don't know. He almost said it sounded like a big trap closing or something. I don't know.
A big trap being closed. It could be like some sort of interdimensional trap, like what I said, where we are being hunted and there are just traps. They're not seen, and you could either accidentally fall into one or one can be placed upon you. There are stories from the 1800s, and there's a great book by Michael Harrison called Vanishings. And in that, he describes many instances where there's a person, they go off into the woods and they're just never seen from again. But their family members go out into the area where they were last seen, and they can faintly hear the callings of their loved one. And they said they can faintly hear it, like not only for days, but months. It's like they're trapped in this parallel area and they can't get out. But they stumbled into this different realm, possibly this different trapped room, and they can't just find their way out of there. So there might be some kind of dimensional pocket that you actually fall into, and sometime an entity will come in. It's like, oh yeah, we caught something. You're coming with us. Now we're going to let you go, or you're dead, and we're going to send you back and clear up the room for somebody else.
And that was kind of the thought too, with the fact that a lot a lot of the individuals have some sort of disability or special needs of some sort. But then on the flip side of that, isn't there like a large number of like very intelligent German like scientists or mathematicians as well?
Yeah. I mean, that's what it appears like a highly qualified, highly educated, fairly fit individuals mentally and physically go missing too. Why is that? It seems, you could speculate. I mean, why German? You know, what makes the German lineage so important? Uh, you could probably speculate. Maybe it's the Third Reich trying to repopulate their scientific ranks. Do they have access to technology, some interdimensional technology, or are there just conduits, portals that are able to be accessed if you have the right amount of technology? Like there's portals out there in Yosemite National Park. There's predetermined portals where you can, if you have the right technology, you can just show up, grab people, and boom, take them. I don't know. It's just so bizarre. You can go down all these different rabbit holes, or they just could be slips in time. People just kind of slip out of time. Um, and it doesn't, I mean, there's not a lot of it makes sense because oftentimes in these missing 411 scenarios, people will be found and they'll have no clothing on, or their shoes will be off. Or sometimes the body will be found close to a lake and their shoes will be off, but their socks will be completely clean, meaning that they didn't walk through the mud or the grass. Either they were levitated or they were carried in some way. It's just so fascinating. And what makes it so interesting, you can speculate and come up with any theory you want, and it's probably going to be just as valid as anybody else's at this point.
Right. But I think too, if we're talking about German scientists and the Third Reich, then we could go down the Operation High Jump wormhole of center of the Earth, Hollow Earth type SS reptilians living in the South Pole.
Yeah, I
it-
know.
yeah,
I mean, I think that there's a lot of people did some good work on like Operation Paperclip and the Nazi scientists coming over here after World War II, but also that the Nazis did not really just go away after World War II, that they went down to Argentina. Then, like you said, Antarctica, um, and that their technology that they did have probably went along with them. And I think that the UFO flaps we saw over DC in the 50s, that could have been the Third Reich, probably the Fourth Reich at that point, saying we didn't go anywhere, we still have the technology, and we're going to fly over the United States Capitol at any time just to show you, well, you did destroy our German, Reich. We're still capable of doing a lot of mischief here, so don't mess with us. Because there's not a lot of UFO flaps over the DC Capitol. You saw it a few times in the 50s. Occasionally, you'll hear some stuff every now and again, but not like that flap in the 50s. Not like just after the end of World War II.
yeah. So if people want to get a little deeper with David's work, do you have a starting point for them? And then since you have all of his books, which one is your favorite?
My favorite, like I think your recommendation, going with the Hunters, is the best one. And David's got a great YouTube channel. Like I'm not like an expert on this stuff. I'm just a hobbyist, and I'm not even a researcher. There are people that have done way more interesting research and have really dug into this. I just talk about it. It's just one of these subjects that I find fascinating. But uh, yeah, canammissing.com. That's his website. He sells his books directly through there. He does state don't buy them from Amazon because they're just really marked up. And, he doesn't, I don't think he sees much of that money. So yeah, go to canammissing.com and also his YouTube channel. I think you just go to put in Can Am Missing on YouTube. And since the start of COVID, he has been doing a lot more on his YouTube channel. And if you just like this straight facts and no speculation, go to them. And he also reads some pretty interesting emails from his viewers, which gives some tidbits into things going on. Like David, he does a good job at documenting the missing 411 profiles, but there's other creepy shit going on in the woods. He doesn't have a monopoly on like paranormal weird stuff going on in the woods. I think he stumbled onto some data points, and he's got like a piece of the puzzle, but I think there are other pieces to the puzzle, and it really does require an entire community to pitch ideas, to dig through folklore, to find things in other countries and other cultures that might be similar to what we're experiencing here in the West. Because there is. Can you imagine just how many different stories there are from China, Malaysia, or Mongolia that is similar to Missing 411, but due to translation, it doesn't get over here? There's probably so much over there that we just don't know about. And this probably is a worldwide phenomenon. It's just tough to bridge those data gaps.
Yeah, and he's only, I mean, I think he's done a little bit of stuff outside of the US, but most of his focus is within North America.
Yeah. He touched on a few cases down in Australia. So he does go there every now and again, and he does bring up interesting points, like little pieces of folklore that like happens throughout the world. He did touch on like the talk I saw him give. He did touch on this demon from the Middle East, where this demon does abduct people, and oftentimes when someone is abducted by this demon, the weather changes, which sounds like Missing 411. And this is like something that the story of a legend of a demon from like 2,000, 1,500 years ago. Crazy stuff. It just makes you wonder: is it the same entities over and over again throughout our human history, and the only thing that's changed is our perception? Like, as we evolve technologically, our perception changes, so we're not only able to, but we perceive these entities differently. I think us, the viewer, is critically important here. And I think that's been talked about on the Skinwalker Ranch TV show and books, is that you, the participant in these paranormal events, are critically important. They almost probably wouldn't exist if us conscious people did not observe them in some way and attach some sort of interpretation to them. And it's almost like I don't want to use the word manifest, but we might manifest them in a certain way. I'm not sure totally. It's kind of like how you interpret an abstract painting or a Rorschach test. I think the paranormal can be that in a certain way. And Skinwalker Ranch is a whole nother fascinating thing. There's portals, Bigfoot, UFOs, craziness that goes on at Skinwalker Ranch.
Mike, you've mentioned Bigfoot a couple times, and you said you like to poke fun, but you're a believer.
Yeah.
So have you ever had a Bigfoot encounter, or what is your kind of interpretation of how Bigfoot exists and why we can never seem to snag one or get a clear photo or anything like that?
I was a lot more skeptical 10 years ago than I am now. There's so many eyewitness testimony. You can take eyewitness for what it is. And I would definitely make fun of some eyewitnesses because it just seems so crazy. Especially, like, for instance, the story I made fun of, a woman swears to God that she had a romantic encounter with a Bigfoot and had sex multiple times with a Bigfoot in a marijuana field. That is just crazy to me that it would happen and then also happen in a marijuana field and also happen like many, many times. Like, this just seems incredible to me. But, there are enough stories that at least should warrant a scientific investigation of some hairy hominid out there that is very elusive. A lot of people that are in the Bigfoot community swear up and down that it is some sort of primate, some sort of North American ape, like some sort of North American gorilla. It's just extra tall. It's an animal. It has a high intelligence, but it is no smarter than a gorilla. Then there's another sect of the Bigfoot people, which I probably would include myself in, that believe that they are hyper intelligent and that they are probably super hairy humans, super hairy, large humans. And that the reason why the DNA tests are not coming back as something as a gorilla, and all the DNA tests that they do find come back as human, is probably because they're most likely human, and that they're just super large. They're either called wild men back in the 1800s, early 1900s. There's a lot of stories you can of just wild men. And hell, the Native Americans would often talk openly about trading with the wild men, and they're not to be fucked with. I'm sorry, I don't know if you guys can curse here.
yeah.
They're not to be fucked with, but they would do some sort of trading in some way with them. They acknowledge them, but they would also steer clear. And they were giant, 7 to 9 feet tall, depending on what reports you read. And David Paulides' talk on Bigfoot, he goes deep into this. And a lot of people who are hardcore into the ape side of Bigfoot don't like David Paulides and his interpretation or suggestion that the Bigfoot is actually an offshoot of a human, which is fairly controversial if you think about it. Because if you're out in the woods cracking a shot off, you could be shooting something that could be genetically classified as a human. And so would you be, hypothetically, if you take a shot of a Bigfoot and you kill it and you drag the body in and they do scientific testing on it and the DNA comes back as human, are you tried or brought up on charges as manslaughter for killing a human? Maybe that's why they don't want to classify it as a human, because the hunt would be significantly, if you put together a hunt to go hunt Bigfoot, that's different when you think it's an animal versus if you believe it's a human. It's almost sick if you think it's a human and you still choose to hunt it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. You mentioned that some of the people within the community don't like David or his beliefs, and I feel like that's just a reoccurring theme, especially like in the alternative media community, where we're in these different sects, or if God forbid you believe that the Earth is flat, then you're ostracized from having any sort of critical thinking or input into other topics, say like JFK or 9/11, or all you get discredited all the time. Do you see that a lot too, where it's just like if you have one opinion that might be different, then you kind of get ostracized from the community?
I get ostracized just for making jokes. There's a lot. I get a lot of hate on my missing 411 stuff because I will crack jokes at certain stuff, and I get it. These are darker topics, and I'm not making fun of the people who go missing. I'm making fun of how ridiculous it can be and how absurd these circumstances are. That someone who went missing 7 days ago, their body suddenly turns up again. It's almost like a cruel joke is being played on the victim and the family. And on its surface, it's absurd and it should be made fun of to a certain degree. That the FBI is not taking this more serious. If they are, the local authorities are not taking this more serious. They deserve to be ridiculed to a certain degree. They need to be satirized. There needs to be some sort of parody to bring shame upon this. Not the family, not the victims, but the authorities who are supposedly in charge of keeping the grounds and us safe. We pay tax dollars. And I know not a lot of that goes to some good, but you'd imagine some good detective work that would go on. And I would think that the FBI has amassed a lot of data and they're just choosing not to share it with us because maybe what they found is fairly concerning. And they probably know a lot more than they are willing to let on. I do have a couple clips here that from David Paulides' Missing 411 / Bigfoot talk, if you guys want to hear it.
Yeah.
This one is about a minute and a half. This is the affidavits that David Paulides has collected over the years concerning Bigfoot.
Affidavits. John Green was the first guy in the Bigfoot world that used affidavits. An affidavit in court is considered a legal factual document. So let's say that you come to me and you say, Dave, I was walking down the path, a Bigfoot crossed the trail in front of me. Okay, I sit down, I write it all up, and I put it in an affidavit form. And you sign under penalty of perjury that what you're saying is true and correct. That's an affidavit. It's submitted in court as factual document. Nobody else has ever done that. No other Bigfoot group ever has done that or ever will do it in the future, I don't think. It's been 8 years since I started it. I pitched it to every other Bigfoot group. Nobody wants to do it. So the biggest Bigfoot group in the world won't do it. And we've had 4 investigators from that group leave and ask to join my group. Why? Because they submitted reports and the powers to be in that group changed the words in their document to reflect it looked like an ape. And they quit. And they came to join us. Because that wasn't the first time the reports were changed. It was multiple times.
Well, there you go. Infighting within the Bigfoot community and trying to change the data or change the information to fit their worldview. I do like David. I'm not going to say he's right all the time, but in these instances where, if you have a signed affidavit under penalty of perjury, I would take that a little bit more serious than somebody who just is hell-bent on finding an ape no matter what. I do have a couple more clips here when talking about what is Bigfoot. And I like David's take on this. This is like 40 seconds about a human hybrid.
Again, I'm not going to go through it all, but it's just more supportive evidence. When the study analyzed mitochondrial DNA, there's 2 types of DNA, nuclear, mitochondrial. Nuclear, you get out of blood, you get out of tissue. That will show the father's side of the equation. Mitochondrial shows the mother's. Skin tags of a Bigfoot have tested human, every one. The point cannot be stressed enough. Non-human hair yielded human DNA. When you link the eyewitness testimony that witnesses saw a large hairy bipedal hominid leaving the hair, you know you have empirical evidence that Bigfoot is human. Hybrid. Human hybrid.
And a lot of the hair that is retrieved from some supposed Bigfoot evidence is like longer and is kind of coarse. It's like long pubic hair. Like if the pubic hair was like 5 to 6 inches, that's some pretty long pubic hair, but that's the consistency that it supposedly is and what it looks like. A lot of it tends to be red. And then he also has the results, the DNA results. And this 30 seconds right here of the DNA results of what it comes out of these hairs.
So we had nuclear and mitochondrial DNA, we sent it, and they said, well, the female side of your testing comes from the Middle East 12 to 15,000 years ago. Here's the kicker. The male side, they called us about it and said, in the history of GenBank, we have never had that DNA come through. There is no match.
So the speculation there is, according to David Paulides and Bigfoot, is that it is a half human and half giant offspring. That is what a Bigfoot is. And there's been various things throughout history where there are stories of giants that come down, have sex with women, and produce an offspring. That happens. There's a lot of stories about that. And I think what David Paulides is insinuating right there is like that has happened and the offspring are Bigfoot. And they're very elusive. A lot of people think that they might have some sort of superpowers or telekinetic or telepathic ability. I don't know about that. It is possible they might have some sort of stunning ability by using their voice, like some sort of sonic stun. Beyond that, I don't know. It's all speculation. But I think when it comes to that DNA, if it's to be believed, I think it's pretty spot on. I'm sorry, what are you saying?
I was just going to say that's like the whole Anunnaki story.
Yeah, it is the Anunnaki story. And I know people want to write that off. Like, I guess who would write that off would be the mainstream academics. You know, they don't want to entertain this stuff. Mainstream science does not want to entertain this stuff. Mainstream science back in the late 1800s, early 1900s here in America, they didn't want to entertain giant bones. And I got 2 books. There's many books that have been written on giants, and skeletons have been found. Skeletons have been covered up by the Smithsonian because it did not fit with their Judeo-Christian beliefs. Even though, like, you know, Goliaths and giants are mentioned in the Bible, I guess coming face to face with it is a different thing when you're trying to reconcile your scientific and your faith side. And I guess finding many giants just didn't fit into their worldview. So why not just hide it because the world's not ready to know? I suspect, you know, the military and the government does the same thing with UFOs. Like, we just have to hide it because we know what's best for everyone because the world's just not ready to know. When it comes to missing 411 stuff, FBI have investigated. There have been many private investigators who've done something, many detectives that have stayed on these cases for a long time. I'm sure the FBI knows, at least has an idea of what kind of predator might be doing this, but it's probably too concerning. So they're going to keep it quiet because the public doesn't really need to know that, hey, by the way, if you go out to a national forest, there's not a high chance that you will get abducted by a demon, but there is a probability that you might get abducted by a demon and you might not return. I mean, having the FBI acknowledge that there might be some sort of weather demon that might abduct people, they couldn't do it. The FBI could not do that and maintain any sort of credibility. Although I don't know what credibility FBI has now. At least they maybe has a little bit. But.
Yeah, I think when talking about paranormal activity and creatures like this, it kind of just shatters the reality that we accept and would kind of cause chaos in the mainstream. And another creature I wanted to talk about, we're from Point Pleasant, New Jersey, but I know in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, you got Mothman. Could you kind of just dive into Mothman a little bit for our listeners who might not know anything about him?
Mothman, I mean, that's like, when it comes to like classic creatures, I mean, that ranks up there. Mothman is like one of those fascinating cryptid cases where it kind of morphs, and the stories around the creature are even more important than the creature itself. That's where John Keel really came into prominence. He wrote the Mothman prophecies, not just about like Mothman, but all the other weird events that were going on. There are stories that a large humanoid winged creature in the 60s and even up into probably the early 70s was around Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And there are stories that it would chase cars, hover over cars. It would be seen at an old TNT factory, that it would land down and be out someone's window. There are instances where it was face to face with somebody and it just kind of hovered and then went up into smoke. It's got glowing eyes and it has large wings. It's very demonic if you had to put like a description to it. And people will often consider the appearance of Mothman as sort of like a premonition, as like a bad omen, because you had the big bridge disaster there in Point Pleasant. And, you know, it is this classic folklore. A lot of people think it might be a giant bird, you know, like a giant thunderbird, but no one really knows at this point. I think some of the more interesting UFO sightings around Mothman is just as compelling as the creature sightings itself. So now I'll play this little clip. This is from the Small Town Monsters documentary from 2017 about Mothman. And they just put out a new movie called Mothman Legacy. And it goes over a timeline of the first appearance of Mothman, all the many sightings that happened in the 60s, early 70s. And according to, I guess, pop culture and common knowledge, sightings dropped off. People really didn't see Mothman through the 80s, 90s, up until 2000s, but that's not true. There were sightings in that area for quite a while, up through the 90s. Even in, I think, early 2000s, there was like an EMT paramedic who had an encounter with Mothman, giant winged creature. And then most recently, probably within the past 3 years, there were many, many Mothman sightings in Chicago, if you can believe that. So if it migrated, then it went to Chicago, or it didn't migrate. It's just there's more Mothman than we give Mothman credit for. So here's a quick little clip from the 2017 Small Town Monsters documentary, and this is on Mothman.
During the early part of the 20th century, with frequent disasters befalling Point Pleasant, rumors about a bizarre Birdman began to circulate. The most startling fact about these Birdman stories is that they occurred over 50 years prior to the Mothman encounters of the 1960s. Professor James Gay Jones of Glenville State College documented multiple sightings of the Birdman in his book, Haunted Valley and More Folk Tales of Appalachia. The sightings began around 1914, with the creature being described as a large bird with the head of a man and a wingspread of at least a dozen feet. It was said to be of monstrous size and was covered in dark, reddish feathers that glistened in the sunlight. According to Jones, sightings of the Birdman persisted well into the 1940s, where it was reported by motorists who drove along the Ohio River just outside of Point Pleasant. These encounters were also said to be a prelude or epilogue to a tragic occurrence.
A good brief overview. And one of those people that traveled back and forth from Ohio to West Virginia, they had their own encounter, not only with not Mothman per se, but with a UFO, and that got attached. That whole story of a UFO landing down in front of this guy's truck, a guy getting out, going up to the window of this guy's truck. A sewing machine salesman went up to his truck and telepathically communicating with this driver, stating that he was an alien from a distant planet, and his name was Ingrid Cold. Let the driver go, and then the driver went home and told his wife about it, told local media about it. But that UFO story got associated with Men in Black. It got associated with Mothman and everything that was going on in the Point Pleasant area, but also the huge UFO and cryptozoological flap of the 60s and 70s in Pennsylvania, which Stan Gordon wrote about in his book Silent Invasion. Like, man, when you want to talk about paranormal stuff and weird stuff going on, West Virginia and Pennsylvania, great states for that. Like, some crazy stuff going on there. I'll play this one last. This is a bit of a longer clip. This is the last clip I'll play for you guys. But this is about Mothman and somebody encountering him. I think coming face to face with Mothman, and this is their experience.
There were various reports of the Mothman sightings of being of a supernatural nature, almost a mental type vision of whatever this thing was.
I lived up on Jefferson Avenue. Of course, my wife and I, and we were about 19 years old, I think, at the time. We went to bed that night. The way the bed was, it was a window on my left, and sometime in the night, and it seems to me like it was about 3 o'clock, and I was facing that window, and I looked out the window and looked down at the street light, and there was a crossing. I remember distinctly there was a car come across the crossing. And I turned my head to the right. I mean, I can still feel that, really. Turned my head to the right, and there, to me, it was the devil, Mothman, standing there by my bed, and I just sort of froze up. And I tried to talk, and I couldn't. It was this awful, horrible feeling. And I thought, Lord, what can I do? This thing is here. It must, this evil presence. And it was standing there, and it had a body about 6 feet tall, sort of a dirty lunar color. I didn't see any buttons or zippers or anything like that, but it was a gray form, like a solid robe, and then without seams down the arm. Then the hands were down, or whatever those were on the other end. They kind of disappeared by the bedside. I didn't see that. And red eyes, and kind of back in like, but it was its presence. Here I am. I feel that. It was this evil, 100% evil. So by being a churchgoer and a Christian, knowing what the Bible says about the blood of Christ, I began to plead the blood in my mind, and little by little, that thing just disappeared like putting, I guess, salt on a slug. I mean, it just kind of evaporated. And I've never forgotten it. I never will. I'm 74 years old. And that was 50 years ago. And but it's just as plain in my head today as it was then.
So there you go. The guy started to pray, and the thing went away. There's also been similar accounts of people who have encountered little gray aliens being so scared that they would pray to Jesus Christ, and they would go away as well. I mean, at this point, Jimmy and Richard, what do you think?
You got me believing in the Jersey Devil now, so I'm in.
I mean, there's just so much craziness here. Well, Jimmy, like, what do you think? What do you think Mothman is?
Oh man, I don't even know where to begin. When we were listening to this, I was looking up pictures, and that thing looks pure evil, you know, an evil looking bug. And from accounts of what that gentleman just said, I'd have to agree that it's something evil. And if, you know, the power of prayer would chase him away or get him away, there's definitely not a creature you want to come in contact with.
It just seems like some of these creatures accidentally step into our dimension for a little bit, and like they like dip in, like then they dip back out, like they do like a Mario 3 kind of thing. They go behind the set, and then they're able to squirrel around and then come back out. And if it's just a creature, if it's just an animal, I would not want to attribute any sort of malice if it's just doing what it does. Like if it's working on instinct, like my dog might bite me because I grabbed its food on accident. It just was defending its food. Bad dog, but it didn't have any real malice behind it. So I would hate to attribute Mothman to be a presence of evil, but that's what that guy thought. That's what he felt. He felt some presence of evil, so he prayed to Jesus Christ because that's what he believed in. That's what he thinks good is. So that's what he used to combat this psychic evil.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up being terrorized by the thought of the Jersey Devil all through, you know, growing up near the Pine Barrens and whatnot. And I think at this point, my whole thing is I don't want to, if I were to ever encounter any of these things, is not look at it as they're coming to encounter to do harm. Like I always try to look for the light in situations. So like, yeah, probably, you know, have that come to Jesus moment and start praying a little bit. But I think that's the thing. We always associate, you know, Bigfoot or aliens or cryptids or whatever as like they're here to do harm. And maybe they're here to do good. Maybe, you know, as the UFO sightings started popping up more, you know, around the time of the nuclear, you know, bombs and stuff like that, maybe they are here looking out and watching over that we don't, you know, blow ourselves up or do something too stupid to affect not just this planet, but the whole universe.
You might, I mean, I think you're kind of right. And I think it is, maybe it's bad of us to attribute that these unknown things are here to do harm. Like for Bigfoot, for instance, you know, it just seems like they're doing their own thing. And occasionally you'll hear of a negative interaction with humans, but for the most thing, they're just out there shitting in the woods, living their life. It's us who are out there searching for them. When it comes to UFOs and aliens, yeah, the abduction scenarios, they do seem terrifying because you are being taken against your own will. But I've also read plenty of positive encounters with aliens. Um, and then you have stuff like Missing 411, where you just seem to be supposed to get abducted out of the blue. But there are stories of fairies, and fairies have a long and storied history throughout many European countries and folklore, of fairies abducting people, goblins abducting people. And if you do not ask for permission from certain fairies or fae, at least within Iceland, to build upon a land, move a boulder, do something with your own property. If you do not ask permission from the land, bad things may befall you. And I take those lessons to heart. It may sound goofy to people, but when my wife and I purchased this property that we now live on in Ohio, we have a few acres, and it gets dark around here at night. It gets very dark around here in the morning. And we are very aware that we are changing the land. We're putting the fencing for gardens, for chickens, for goats. And each time we change the property, we do ask for permission that we are going to do that. And we have promised that we are going to leave it a section of the property untouched, that we will not develop or do anything with that section of the property. So weeds and the streams and the trees can just grow as wild as they like. Because if you pay attention to fairy lore, which apparently I do a lot, I don't know, it's just I pay attention to it a lot. They like that. And then you could be at somewhat within harmony with nature. And I think that a lot of us humans lose that. We're very consumed about technology, and our ability to change things doesn't mean that we always should change things. And so I'm becoming more appreciative of nature and the environment in my older age, whereas in my 20s and early 30s, and I'm just a fucking asshole, very self-absorbed, not cognizant or conscious of my own impact on the environment. And now I am. And it's not like to say I'm some like ecological crazy person. I'm just aware of my footprint and where it goes, and that out in the woods, when you're alone, you're vulnerable, you're weak, you're human. Yeah, you have some tools, you have some wits about yourself, but you're also at the mercy of nature and the environment. So you better pay respect.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you, brother. I'm 44 and was probably quite the asshole, as Jimmy could tell you, in my 20s. But as I've gotten older, yeah, I've become a little bit more aware, a little bit more woo-woo. Try to have a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing. And um, yeah, I go into everything with an open mind, and I don't poo-poo anything. It seems like there's a lot of that going on that is just, people think you're crazy if you say certain things, and it's just like, "No, I'm just asking questions. I don't know anything." Like, people tell me I'm a know-it-all. I'm like, no, I'm not a know-it-all. I just asking questions. Like, don't you think some of these things that are going on deserve questioning right now?
Do you guys friends and family, are they open to these ideas in subjects, or they mostly just kind of avoid them?
So mostly they either try to avoid them, because usually if we engage in them, it leads to some heated discourse. But we do have some cousins and stuff that are around our age, and we do another podcast with them. And those guys are on board, and they're open to things, and we discuss those things. But definitely, we just know with certain topics, especially in 2020, that we just don't bring those to the dinner table.
What about you, Jimmy? Do you have any friends or family that are open to some of, like, you can probably bring up UFOs because that's been in the media, but you probably can't bring up fairies because that's a little bit even too crazy for them.
So it's crazy because I feel with, especially the people I surround myself with, can definitely bring up UFOs, definitely bring up conspiracies. But anytime you bring up vaccines or anything going on, now you're crazy. It's like, wait, we could talk about UFOs, but we can't talk about vaccines. But yeah, I'm in the same boat as Rich. Our parents, I just know not to even go there. And if it starts going there, to direct it into stuff that's not going to be heated. Because at the end of the day, I'm not trying to get in arguments with people. I'm not trying to shake them. Like if they want to come to me and ask questions, I'm down. But I'm not trying to get in arguments about things because, like Rich said, I'm not 100% on things. I just like to ask questions and keep an open mind.
Yeah. I mean, I my people who know me, know I've always been into UFOs and conspiracies like that. Uh, all my friends, they've known that. My mom has known that since I was probably 7 or 8. I've always been into this subject. And my mom would buy me UFO books. Like I remember for like my 16th or 17th birthday, I got a book called The Day After Roswell, written by Colonel Philip Corso. I remember getting that, and my mom is very open. She's a very religious woman, but she's open to the paranormal. She's had her own paranormal experiences. She's open to UFOs. My dad indulged a little bit. Um, but my mom would go to UFO conventions with my little brother, go see David Paulides talk, to go talk to, Nick Pope. So she indulges in my parents. When I got married to my wife Rihanna, they came out to Sedona, Arizona for our wedding, and instead of doing like the wild bachelor party kind of thing, it was a small wedding. So my wife and I, we invited everyone to go out to the desert to do night vision UFO watching, and they all indulged, and we had a great time out there in Sedona, Arizona, looking up at the sky with these night vision goggles, seeing lights that appear to leave the atmosphere, seeing things that you really can't explain. If they were aircraft, they certainly weren't giving off the standard aircraft blinking signal. Um, if they were spaceships, wow, the United States or someone here on Earth has some pretty incredible stuff. And if they were satellites, apparently they're satellites that can stop in mid orbit and then keep going. That's what I saw through the night vision goggles, and I know other people saw them too. Incredible experience, and it was nice to share that with my family, who were fairly open about it. But it didn't like that. It was not like that led to some long, protracted kind of talk. They were just open to the experience, and then that was it. So that was nice.
Right on.
Mike, we appreciate your time. I know we've gone a little over. Do you mind
That's
if
all
we
right.
ask you some rapid fire questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So before we get into the rapid fire questions, one thing I have for you is you deal with some heavy stuff, some stuff that's a little out there. How do you keep yourself grounded and sane?
I don't know if I do. Break down. Been going through a lot of depression, just trying to find a job here and there, the state of the world. Not very well. Thankfully, my wife has introduced me into to some breathing exercises. So usually every other morning we'll wake up, we'll do these breathing exercises. We'll do like these poses and rapid fire breathing, kind of like I don't know if you guys know who Wim Hof is.
Yeah.
But do some breathing exercises like that, and that does help. It's certainly it's a lot better for me than drinking. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Exercise too. I need to exercise more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's our big thing. We kind of started this. We've been lifelong athletes, and when we started this, it was mostly talking to athletes and health people. So we're into the Wim Hof, we're into the breathing. Try to, especially in 2020, keep our substance use to the bare minimum. It just now setting is of the utmost important when you're dabbling in those things, and just seems like there's not the right setting going on too often here in 2020. So we're right there with you.
It's tough.
I get down with some breath of fire every once in a while, especially in traffic. Try not to pass out though. Go ahead, Jim.
And I know you said you wake up and you do your breath work. Do you have any other daily rituals that you do to kind of ground yourself?
Oh man, I mean, before the pandemic, I was a lot better, but I try to make sure I laugh at least a few times a day, and I find that there's not much recently that makes me laugh. So I have been listening to old episodes of Opie and Anthony on YouTube, and just going back to like 2012 and just listening to full shows, and just it's a nice little time capsule to see what was going on back then, and also it just takes your mind to a different place away from the COVID, the pandemic, and the constant propaganda that's going on right now. So I try to laugh at least a few times a day, and doing that is probably the best way I found to do for myself.
Awesome. That would be the next one we would ask is, what are you listening to music wise, podcast wise? You got any audiobooks or are you reading anything?
So right there, yeah, I listen to a lot of Opie and Anthony when I can, but it also goes back to some old Howard Stern. When it comes to podcasts, I'll listen to No Agenda. They're like my go-to when it comes to like hardcore news, John C. Dvorak and Adam Curry. But also I will listen to Gramerica. I like them. Tinfoil Hat, Ripple Effect, and Macroaggressions, Big Time.
Yeah.
Higher Side Chats with Greg Carlwood, absolutely. And I'll dabble around every now and again to some other stuff. But when I want to listen to music, man, I still get I go through these phases. Like I'll wake up with a song in my head and then I'll just listen to that. Like today, I listened to Madonna. But the couple of days ago, I was listening to Dillinger Escape Plan, and I was listening to like the album Miss Machine, and then I'll get on this Faith No More kind of thing, and then I'll spiral off and I'll listen to one song. I'll get stuck in my head, like Helmet, Aftertaste, that album. Like there's like the first 5 songs are amazing. I was listening to it on repeat and get all pumped up, and then I'll get diverted off and go do something else. But usually when I listen to music, it'll inspire me to write music, and then I'll start writing. So I'm casually writing stuff with my wife and a few people, and we kind of release, maybe my wife and I try to release one song every 3 months or so. We put it out on YouTube. So it's been nice to do that. She can sing, I can't.
Nice. And as a musician, when you are listening to music, are you getting down with vinyl, or are you a Spotify guy, or how do you consume your music?
So upstairs we have a record player with a tube amp and going in some nice speakers. And usually when we listen to the record player up there, we listen to our go-tos, lots of David Bowie on vinyl, a lot of T-Rex. Probably I got some Iggy and the Stooges up there that I listen to quite a bit, but it's a lot of David Bowie up there. And we're probably going to expand it to some Beatles, but we got some Melvins we'll put on every now and again on vinyl. And every now and again, I'll put on Mastodon on vinyl. But when I'm on the go, it's YouTube music. Honestly, it's YouTube music. Since I subscribe to YouTube Red, I just get YouTube music, and I can find a good chunk of what I need on there. And we just watched this documentary on the Bee Gees on HBO, and it was fascinating how amazing the Bee Gees are and how many songs they wrote and how shit on they got. And I was like, I'm just gonna fucking listen to Bee Gees. And I already knew they were great. I just had to be reminded.
Yeah. I would say if you ever get tired of the old Howard episodes or Opie and Anthony stuff and you want to laugh, check out the Crab Feast podcast.
What is it? Crab Feast?
Crab Feast, yeah.
Okay.
Ryan Sickler, he's a comedian based in California. He's originally a Maryland guy, so that's where the name Crab Feast comes from. And now he's morphed it into his new iteration, which is called the Honeydew Podcast. But he has comedians come on, they tell crazy stories about their life, hardships, just fucked up stuff. But just listening to Ryan Sickler laugh alone will make you laugh.
I'll check it out. Yeah, I do need to laugh.
He's got a very infectious laugh.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. I need stuff to listen to that's a little bit more lighthearted, I guess.
Cool.
Mike, are you a coffee drinker?
Oh yeah, big time.
How do you take it? How do you brew it?
So we got one of those Chemex like glass things.
Yes.
And I just boil my water in the morning, pour it over there, and boom, it just do that. Takes a little longer, but I like it. And then I get my beans. There's just like a little, it's not Whole Foods here, but in Ohio, it's called Raisin Rack. It's a smaller kind of health market, and I get some nice organic beans, and I do a light roast. I like a lighter roast if I can.
That's where the caffeine kick is.
Yes, yeah, the lighter roast is where the caffeine kick is. Not a lot. People think darker is better, but no, go
No,
light, go blonde.
that's right. When you're brewing, are you using tap water?
We have a filter system in the house, so we have a radiant filter system. So we have a well system and a cistern, and so our whole entire house is filtered with this thing.
Awesome.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
it's as filtered as it can be. If we want double filtered, then we'll filter that, and that'll go into our Berkey, and then we'll have like double filtered water. But we're pretty good, we think.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, there's also a company called Third Wave Water, and they sell like effervescent tablets that you put in your water before you brew. Some of our Uber coffee nerd friends recommend that we put those Third Wave tablets in our water before we brew, and then that really brings out those notes where you see on the bag, like salted caramel or all those things. I don't ever really taste those, but my buddy who recommends these tabs, he says he swears that he can specifically taste all the notes that they say because of these tablets.
Oh wow, okay. I might have to look into that when I want to
Yeah.
get like a little bit more nerdy with my coffee. Usually,
Definitely.
like I wake up anymore. I'm waking up at 4:30 or 5 a.m. in the morning, and I'm just like, I can't go back to sleep, so I'm just gonna make some coffee, and I don't care what it is, but and I'll just drink it to get up and go play with my cat.
Right on. One of our other questions that we ask all the time, I'm sure you've got one. What is your favorite conspiracy theory?
Jesus. I mean, favorite one. I guess the favorite one is, and I think the ultimate one is that it is Roswell, because to me that is where political conspiracies, like a group of people, that's what I can consider a conspiracy is, a group of people that have an agenda that is secret. That's where conspiracies collide with the paranormal. And I'm considering UFOs to be somewhat paranormal, because you have a supposed crash of these extraterrestrial beings that were, 1 minute they were extraterrestrial, next minute they're some sort of weather balloon, and it was taken away and has been kept secret for over 50 years, and it's still being talked about. There are presidents that have tried to release information. There have been so many investigations. The United States Air Force has stonewalled on 3 separate occasions or tried to explain it away 3 separate times, and it still comes back. That keeps popping back up over and over again. I think that's the granddaddy of all modern conspiracies. It starts there with the security state and the security that was built up around whatever crashed there. It certainly did launch a huge ass security state that is still in place today.
And that stuff's in your neck of the woods, right? The remains?
Yeah, I mean, right Patterson, right down the street, not too far.
Interesting.
Awesome. Mike, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your work and the twist you bring to the community and making us laugh and keeping it interesting. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you tonight.
Hey, thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, Richard. Nice meeting you both.
Yeah, it's great to meet you. And also, if you could just give our best to Joe and Kretsch, tell them we love them as well. Oh, real quick, before I just always racks my mind. Do you have a soundboard that you just know what clips to push?
The Goblin.
I
Son
the
of a
shampoo.
Yeah, I got everything. I got like probably a rack of like 200 on hand at all times, but then I have like a whole list. It's like a whole complicated thing.
The shampoo.
It's just I have so many, too many.
Is it on a board, or do you have it in a program that you're just clicking?
I have it on a board, and so my board is a program called Soundbite, which has 4 racks, and I use QuickTime for all my most recent ones, and then I'll still use Flash soundboards for some of them, but Flash is dead as of the end of the year. But I'm probably going to invest in a Dr. Sample, and I'll use those. My Dr. Sample just plugged it into my board and just use that for all my heavily used go-to ones, and then I can move it over and go on my green screen over there and play samples too. So,
do you have a favorite?
My go-tos are these.
That's right.
Because then Alex Jones can agree with anything I say.
Exactly.
And it's just kind of I just use those habitually,
That's right.
and it gets really annoying.
Exactly.
I love it. It makes me laugh every time.
He's funny, and he just says weird stuff.
When I have sex with those dudes, they look good.
I mean, there will be a time where I will have Alex Jones on the show, and then I will be playing him these clips, and he will be talking to himself. It will happen.
And I'm a man.
Well, we look forward to it. We love your work. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep fighting the good fight. And yeah, give all the guys at the union they wanted our best too. We're friends with Charlie and Ricky. We still can't get Sam to respond to an email, but other than that, we love it.
That's all right. Hey, keep in contact. We'll invite you on to the Union of the Unwanted, and maybe you guys can come hang out and do introductions that way.
We would love it.
Be an
Thank you
honor.
very much.
All right, Jimmy,
Mike.
Richard, nice
All right.
meeting you. Nice talking
Nice to
with
meet
you.
you.
Talk to you guys
Good
soon.
one.
Take care. Have a good night.